Yeah.
Man, that is an ode to Tommy's lost drumsticks.
Yeah, exactly. Somewhere in the airline carrier.
Welcome everybody to the drum department. As you can clearly see, we have the man, the myth, the legend himself here with us today, Tommy friggin' Aldridge, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Welcome here, man.
A little intimidating being in here, let me tell you.
This massive crowd in front of you of Ross and Jesus.
Yeah.
It's like being surrounded by a bunch of professional drummers, but they all have video cameras.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like a jury, right?
Yeah. Love it.
So yeah, it's kind of joking, but yeah, Tommy's actually, he's had some bad luck with luggage. So, of course, though, you're also well known for playing with your hands.
I was gonna say, it's so much cooler seeing this, like, how hard you hit, like even with your fists, like you hit your cymbals up close and just seeing it in the video.
Yeah, it's totally true.
So cool.
All sleight of hand.
Yeah.
All sleight of hand.
We'll talk more about that.
So welcome to everybody out there on YouTube. Welcome to all the people in the members area. This is going to be a great hour. This is just going to be a hang with Mr. Aldridge. So we're just going to talk about drumming. We're going to talk a little bit about your history. This really cool monstrosity that we have in front of us.
Yeah.
Do you name your drum kits? Does this have a cool name to it?
I do not. Through the course of various evenings, I've called them a few names, but no, I don't. I have too many to name, I'm afraid.
That's fair.
Collected quite an extravaganza of drums over the decades.
So if you're not familiar with Tommy's work, he is a legendary rock and heavy metal drummer, probably best known for double bass drumming, pioneering a lot of double bass work. Let's see, some of the luminaries you've worked with would be Pat Travers, Gary Moore, Ozzy Osbourne, Whitesnake, and lots of other acts. Anyone else we should mention?
No, I mean, there's been some few different things in between, but no, that's pretty much the higher points.
So those of you on YouTube, please feel free to ask questions as we go. We're going to grab a couple and we're going to pluck them out. We're going to ask Tommy some questions.
Yeah.
We're going to give away some stuff too, so stay tuned. But I want to start, Tommy, with, and you've probably told the story a million times, but maybe one more time, why not? Double bass. You have kind of an interesting story about how you started playing double bass.
Yeah, I don't know how interesting it is, but when I was a kid, one of my good buddies was a drummer, and he sort of lost interest, and this was early on in my very formative years when I was just trying to work my way through the various rudiments, and my beginning time, months and years into trying to apply them to the kit. And he kind of lost interest, and when he did, he left his drum kit at my place, and so I pimped his bass drum, not because I thought it was anything cool or there wasn't a lot of history with two bass drums at that point, and just started messing around and applying some of the things that I was playing with my left foot on the hi-hat to the kick drum, and it just started splitting my hands in different ways that I wasn't able to do with a single kick. And it just kind of opened some doors, and it was all initially just exercises, splitting rudiments from the left hand to the right foot, right hand to the left foot, and so forth. Just very simplistic things, but just a way to keep myself interested sometimes in my drum room. So it wasn't really a means to an end or anything at all. It was started just as silly little exercises and just having fun on my own in my drum room.
So that being said, did you... you talk about rudiments and exercises. Did you take lessons at all?
I did not, and I don't say that boastfully. I would love to have taken lessons. If I have any regrets, is that I didn't do a few years in drum corps.
Okay.
Because it really lays out the fundamentals of our instrument, the language of our instrument, and really instills the rudimental approach, which is really impossible to move and keep building without them. It literally is. And I have some real holes in my playing. Consequently, again, it's not something I chose. It was just, there was really no one around. I thought I was a little too cool for drum corps.
Okay.
So I didn't do it, but I certainly encourage guys coming up, man, get a good grip on the fundamentals, because they'll take you places you wouldn't otherwise be able to go. You'll be able to do it throughout your life as your taste in music changes. I learned to play stuff that accommodated me emotionally when I was a young kid. And it's like maybe getting a dragon tattoo across your face. When you're hitting 70, you wish you had maybe a small lizard.
Right.
You know, so when you have a bag to draw from, it really allows freedom. There is just so much power in freedom and knowledge, and that is never more so evident than having a good grasp of the rudiments on this instrument. Yeah.
Sorry, I was gonna say, I think it's really interesting that, you know, as you said, you know, maybe not boastfully, you didn't study, but I think also because of your desire to kind of just create interesting patterns with the second bass drum, you created your own path, right? Maybe if you had studied, we may not be sitting here right now.
Well, it wasn't that I didn't study, it's just that there wasn't a teacher. There wasn't a resource like you guys. I mean, there's so many guys right here in this one block area. There's some better drummers in here that I've heard out touring professionally, you know, and I'm serious. So it wasn't so much a choice as not to study, because I was very diligent on my instrument. It's just I studied trying to pick stuff out of albums, trying to figure out what this jazz guy was doing, what Joe Morello's doing, and say, take 5 and a 5/4 signature, which was way over my head. And so I should have, if someone had tapped me and said, Tommy, we'll save that for later, you know, maybe, so before you have a nerve-related breakdown trying to figure out what Joe's doing, you know. And so I spent weeks, and I spent a lot of time, it wasn't like I was shedding or anything, because it was joyful. My mom would come drag me by the scruff of my neck to go have lunch, and then boom, I was back on the kit. So it wasn't something I had to, you know, set a timer on. I'm going to put in 2 hours behind the kit today. It wasn't anything. And so I did study. It's just I didn't have the width and the breadth and the depth of knowledge and resources that are available today. It really is incredible today.
But you put your time in on your own, though, clearly.
Yeah.
Now, did you have like grand designs? Did you want to be a world famous drummer?
I would like to say, no, I wanted to play the drums, and whatever that, it wasn't that I thought I was going to be wealthy. I never for an instant thought that it would be something that would like put a lot of money in my pocket or anything like that. It was just I had a real deep desire to learn about the instrument, to be around it. Just to be around anything, playing with, you know, like I told you earlier, and my mom would come in my bedroom to, you know, to chastise me under the blanket with a flashlight. It wasn't because I was looking at Playboy, I was looking at drum catalogs. I should have maybe been looking at Playboy, but be that as it may, I just love drums and everything having to do with them. And I just wanted to be around them, and I wanted to be a drummer, whatever that was. And at that time, which was back, you know, WW2, somewhere around that time frame, it was not so much so popular, you know.
Right.
I mean, every kid comes out of the womb wanting to do all the fancy stuff and do all the shiny stuff.
Sure,
you know,
yeah.
Until you find out, you start working your way through the rudiments.
This is harder than I thought.
Yeah, and an interesting story about that, when I was working my way as a kid through the rudiments, I thought, oh man, I really got this together. And my mom said, I'll help you buy your next drum. At that time, I only had a snare drum and a hi-hat, and I was just slowly working up, you know. My mom said that she would help me. I was cutting mowing lawns and things like that to raise money to buy drums, and she said, I'll help you out. Don't tell Dad. I'll help you out if you'll go get lessons. And so I went to the local music store, and there was a gentleman there. He wasn't really a drum teacher, but my mom took me there, and I went in his office, and he said, and there was a practice pad there and sticks, and he said, oh, play a single stroke roll, and you know, double stroke roll, you know, could you lead it with your left hand? And I said, oh, yeah, and he said, oh, cool. And then he reached in his drawer and pulled out this weird little contraption and set it on his desk and gave you the shut. It's going, well, it was a metronome. I had no clue that that's what drums and drumming were all about at that point. And he said, now play a single stroke roll, but play it with that. And I could not stay with it. So it was back to square one. And so even though every young guy wants to come out or lady wants to come out and wants to be a drummer, it's not until you start trying to work your way through learning the fundamentals of the instrument and what it takes to really be one. I mean, legitimate from the ground up, you know.
I'm just going to jump in. We were talking with Simon Phillips about this recently when he was out in May. And now it's so interesting because so many drummers, they grow up and they're like, I want to play double bass. They go out, they buy a double bass pedal or 2 bass drums, and they learn that from the beginning. But even Simon was staying on it was the Jeff Beck album he did, There and Back. And he said he just grabbed the bass drum from the other side of the room, set it up, and started playing that on the track. So it was just a thing that happened in the moment, like you said. But now it's like this is something that people just want to learn from the very beginning.
Yeah, and it was interesting. Again, there's not, like I said, I didn't plan it. It wasn't some great image that I had in my head. In fact, when I was a kid, I went to hear a band, and they were playing at a festival outside of New Orleans. And they were playing, and I started hearing stuff off the drums. It sounded like he was playing 16th notes on the bass drum. And I actually met the man, and his name was John Rand, and he played with a band called Flower Power. Okay. That's to tell you how far back it was. Yeah. Well, I said, that's incredible what you were playing on the bass drum. And I was just a teen, I was maybe 15. And he said, what? He said, I wasn't playing that. What happened was I was hearing an echo from where I was standing, and it was doubling. It just happened to be in perfect time, perfect counter to what he was playing. And so I went home and started trying to work on that, you know, and it wasn't something that I ever heard. Because he said, I never played that. Yeah. And he was truthful. Yeah. But it was just that the assumption, or that it wasn't a grand plan. It was just something that I heard, and I thought, well, instead of going 16ths on the hi-hat, 2 and 4 on the snare drum, why don't I do 16ths on the kick drums and 2 and 4 on or quarter notes on the hi-hat and 2 and 4 on the snare. And so it's just substituting another part of the kit for a part that had already been played traditionally on the kit, typically on the kit. John Bonham did it with the triplet. Yeah. He just flip-flopped a figure that jazz cats have been playing for decades. 2 on the snare drum, 1 on the kick. He just flipped it. And he just introduced it to a different part of the drum kit. And when I was going, again, it wasn't a grand plan or a vision that I had. I would just get these silly ideas from exercising. And then once a gentleman that I was playing with, and we were just kids, he said, oh, you should try that in this song. And I never, ever in my wildest considered it in a musical context. I just thought it was like a drumming exercise, you know?
Right. Because to me, like, I've been listening to you since I was like 8 or 9, I think. And my brother is a huge fan of yours, so it was your drumming that we heard in the house all the time.
I was imposed on you.
You were, yes. And so this is such a privilege to be here today. But to me, one of the things I hear in your drumming, speaking of exactly that, is it's almost like you lead from your feet, right? There's so much confidence and power in what you play in the bass drums, and conversationally in the parts you play, that I think is it's certainly unique, but it's also something we don't hear a lot. Because a lot of drummers, they learn hands first, and then they get to their feet, and then they start coming up with how that works. It's still kind of led by hands. I hear a lot of stuff from you as the ground up. It's got this real earthy vibe to it, and I'm sure that's just the way I hear it, but I don't know, man. I think that's what makes it really unique and super powerful.
Oh, well, thank you. I was, being a smaller guy, stature-wise, I'm 5'9", and I weigh 137 pounds and have never been a big guy. And I was always trying to find a way to make things sound heavier or seem heavier, you know? And to me, that seemed like it kind of spoke to that. But the kick drum, even though it's probably one of the least audible of the drums on the stage, the snare being the loudest, when you have 15,000 watts of PA, it changes everything.
Pretty powerful.
And so trying to find a way to make myself sound heavier or bigger than life, I resorted to things like that. And again, you mentioned that now a lot of guys are coming up that I want to learn to play double bass. Well, everybody doesn't, but there was a time when it was a lot more wide open, where guys that you're speaking of, they hear it and they want to go do it. Whereas when in my case, it was almost like reverse engineering.
Yeah.
For me, it was driven by the music. We'd get together with a band. My approach has almost always been more of a band, collaborative interface, rather than me coming up with a bunch of playing, you know, rudiments across one another, or across bar lines, and all those kind of things. It was driven from a completely different space.
Right.
And my motive was completely different. So it was, like I said, it was no grand scheme or plan. It just happened to fall into place in some different ways, you know.
That's beautiful, though. That's what it's all about. Like, it's about that connection to the music you're playing. We have a bad habit these days of overanalyzing everything, you know. Studying jazz is a great one. It's like, you can study jazz to understand the concepts, but like, if you really get down to, well, why did they play that? You're kind of taking the jazz out of it at that point.
Yeah.
You know,
when you start theorizing it, you know.
Yeah.
I mean,
Not
the
that it's
music
bad.
theory, I think, is very valuable, but from that perspective, because you kind of rob yourself. I go in my drum room today, and I did what I did when I was a kid recently, because we just come off the tour. The tour got cut short because of, you know, people getting sick and stuff, and so I just go in my drum room and I play whatever I want to play. I just have fun, and it's just as enjoyable to me as it has always been. And I do a little backtracking in my case, trying to pick up some things from the hand side that I didn't develop because I was developing other things. And there's very few guys out there that can really own a lot of different genres or a lot of different approaches. Simon's one of them. Comes to mind, but there are very few guys that can come from at you from several different angles, and it's really easy to become one-sided, one-dimensional, you know, because I learned the things that I liked hearing, the music that I liked listening to. I didn't have a lot of people coming and saying, play this, and this.
Yeah.
In this bar, could you play that? In this field, could you come in on the E of, you know, I never had that kind of instruction or that kind of mandate, so to speak. I didn't have a curriculum to follow. Consequently, when people want me to like try to teach or come from that perspective, I don't have a curriculum-based approach. When I was young coming up, it's hard for me to embrace it now, you know. And so there's yin and yang, and there's good parts and bad parts to different approaches, you know.
That's something we've learned across the years with Drumeo, because we've had the great fortune of working with so many musicians. Yeah. Everybody learns different. And some folks love learning from a book. Some folks love learning like note by note, stroke by stroke. Some folks, like yourself, like a lot of musicians, just do. And they just learn. And then, but like you say, how do I teach this? I don't know. Like, if I ask you to think about what you're going to play, you're going to be like, well, that's taking me out of the moment. Yeah. I don't know what I just played, right? And it's like, but that's part of the beauty of finding that zone. You know, we're all really trying to get to that space of not thinking and just playing, right?
Yeah.
And like you say, I think you've probably had a great career of that because you've come to it so honestly, right? Okay, so who were you listening to back in the day? Who were your big influences?
The first guy that I really listened to was Joe Morello. That was the music that my mom played in our home, and there's no musical background within my family tree.
Okay.
And my mom was the one that, when there was music in the house, it was my mom playing it. She was a big Supremes fan. She liked, you know, the early rock guys, Elvis, you know, and stuff like that. But that was the first, when I heard Take 5, it kind of piqued my interest and kind of pulled me in.
Did that bring you to the drum set? Or
It did, yeah. And also, the very first instrument I played was sax, and it was the sax solo, because there's some crazy sax going on, you know, come on. Yeah. And I was terrible, you know, and my murderers almost assassinated my entire family, because I walk around the neighborhood with this alto sax, you know, going ballistic. And I'd like to think I grew out of it, but no, I eventually played some guitar and stuff. I did that for a while, but I always went back to the kit, yeah.
Phenomenal. Nice. So as you sort of developed in your career, you spent a lot of time with a band called Black Oak, Arkansas, and I read recently, you can please correct this if this is wrong, it's off of Wikipedia, said that it was a great experience. I think you probably, I think you sound like you got the gig kind of being surprised you got it. There. And then it wasn't necessarily either the style of music or the type of thing you were into necessarily, but you saw the advantage of playing and touring with a band, maybe, you know.
Well, they had signed a big deal with Atlantic, Atco Records, and I was with this silly power trio, Speed Freak Power Trio. We weren't speed freaks, but you would think we were.
Because it's in the name.
And we thought 1, 2, 3, 4 meant the count off of the song was to see who could get to the end of the song first. I'd usually win.
Right,
and so it was a step in that direction. We were unable to get signed. We were playing a lot of original stuff, and I'm not implying that we were ahead of our time, but we were playing versions of Santana music and some different music but really up tempo, and just had our own silly approach to it. Well, it couldn't even get us arrested, you know. And so, out of desperation, I went and auditioned with that band, because the sound. There was a guy in the audience one night when we played. The name of the band was Ali Keith when we played, and it was in Destin, Florida. I remember it like it was yesterday. And this gentleman came up to me and gave me his card, and he said, "When you want to get serious about this business, call me. I know somebody that could use your services." And I didn't pay any mind to it, but I put the card away, you know. And I don't know, it was a month or so later when we had decided to split up, and that's when I decided I'll phone this guy. And he said, "Well, here's a number you should call." And I called this person, and next thing, a couple of weeks later, I was in Memphis, Tennessee, auditioning. He was the sound guy for Black Oak.
Oh, okay.
I was auditioning with that band. He had just signed a deal, and my primary motivation was to advance myself in the business by. Aligning myself with a band that had signed a major deal. I thought that was good thinking. It ended up being stinking thinking, but you don't know that at the time. And I went up, and like I said, there were some guys in there that could really play, and I was sitting outside. I said, "Oh man, I might as well go home," And I got the gig, it surprised me. And not long after I got the gig, I asked one of the guys, "Well, how did you guys end up on choosing me to do it?" Because I knew that some of the guys that went there, they could really play. They were older than I was, and they were just better drummers, and they were more advanced in their playing. They said you were different. You sounded different. Didn't say I was better or anything. They said it was different. They hadn't heard anything quite like it, and that was attractive to them. So I thought, it gave me a little boost.
Sure.
Like when you're working and you're working trying to work something out on the kit and trying to get, because I built my kit slowly as my career grew, my kit grew, and I went from a snare drum to a hi-hat and a snare drum to a rack tom and a floor tom. Kick drum and a floor tom. And it was a real conquest for me to learn to go da 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 when I got the floor tom, because it took me weeks to be able to do it.
I could finally finish that film.
Yeah, 8 notes, 1 EN, 2 EN, 3 EN, 4 around the kick. And so it was a very... it was a progressive in that way,
Oh, I love
and
it.
so whenever you do that, you'd go, and you would get a real boost of adrenaline and say, yeah, I'm getting somewhere, and it'd inspire you to take on the next challenge. Because a lot of what we learn coming up is pretty tedious. I'd sit there for 20 minutes,
Totally.
I've heard you guys playing a paradiddle for a half an hour to 45 minutes on here,
Yeah.
At 50, 60 BPM, So it's tedious. And again, that was some of the things that how I got in some of the figures that I came up with early on was by just trying to beat the tedium and the boredom by playing, instead of playing 16th notes on my hi-hat, I would play the 16th notes on my kick drums, And so it was just a way for me to have fun in my drum room. And
I don't want to impose, but could you show us that?
well, at the time, this was like, it was a disco beat, Went. It's the same pattern. I just assigned it to a different part of the kit. It's the same thing that Bonham was doing. I didn't know that at the time. And then later on, when Bonham and Led Zeppelin came out, it solidified that way of thinking, and it gave me another boost. And so little milestones and little victories, that's how it felt to me, you know? And like we were talking earlier, when I got a Zildjian endorsement, I thought, Shangri-La, dude, I've been there and done that, I'm home free. That's how meaningful that was to me. And so again, it gave me another boost, And so there are little things like that that were really instrumental, no pun intended, in my development when I was coming up, and the things that motivated me. Because I had the friend that I mentioned earlier that he lost interest and stopped playing. He was an awesome drummer. He had skills that were beyond his years. We were starting at the same time. He could play stuff that I had to really shed, so that when he came in the next day, we'd set our kits up front to face. And for me to be able to play it, because I didn't want him to think he could play something that I couldn't. I would shed that night.
Old school shedding.
So it was interesting. It was very interesting.
I love it.
For me.
Speaking of double bass, I just want to answer one question that came in from YouTube. This is from Bird of Prey. They say, ask Tommy how to keep or how to develop your stamina when playing double bass.
Good question. Because I started so early, I skipped a little page. Before I actually took my friend's bass drum and put it over here, before that I had switched my bass drum and my hi-hat positions. I was playing the kick drum with my left foot and the hi-hat with my right foot, just to learn. I figured, well, if a paradiddle, if I have to do half of the paradiddle on this hand and the other half on this hand, and the rudiments were teaching me that I needed to be fluent on both sides, and I needed to be able to leave just as comfortably from the left hand as I could from the right. I thought, well, the same would apply for your feet. no one told me that. It just made sense, you know. And so I learned to play the same thing, or very close to the same thing, on my kick drum on my left foot that I could play on my right before I ever got a bass drum for that side. And so that's a little part that I skipped. But I learned that when I would start doing these things, I would get really tired. My foot would get really tired because the action of a kick drum, and when you're playing two bass drums, particularly because you're countering almost always, you're counterpointing.
Yeah.
So one foot's off the ground at all times, and so balance becomes an issue or becomes a priority as you go around the kit. If you're going to be solid up here, you have to be just on autopilot down here. And that comes with stamina. You develop some stamina, you get a little headroom in your playing, and so you can do all these other things. You don't have to worry about the motor down here. It's like riding a bike. You know, you hit the hill, and I come home after being away for 2 or 3 months and away from the bike. I hit the hill, and I'm like dead in the water.
Yeah.
After 2 or 3 weeks, I don't worry about the hill. I look forward to it, and it's the same principle, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
I do a lot of cycling, and there's a little bit of muscular specificity on your legs and calves and things like that. It's two bass drums, but I think they benefit one another. But the best way to do it is the same way. It's boring, boring, boring. Put your click on, sit there and play. At 65 BPM, 70 BPMs. Do it for 15 minutes. That's a long time. It doesn't seem like it, but to do that for 15 minutes is a long time. And just bump it up, 2 BPMs. Do it for another 15 minutes. You know, your girlfriend or your neighbor or somebody will come in and shoot you and come in the next day and start at the next level. And it's no shortcut, is there?
Yeah.
I don't know of any shortcuts.
But yeah, like for stamina, I mean, you've been doing this, I don't want to say how long, but I mean, a long time.
I have been, yes.
But at a very high level, especially high energy level.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at the way your kit's set up, it is meant to be hit hard. And you don't pull punches. You hit with authority and like precision, but it's, you know what I mean? Like there is a power coming from your playing. And I mean, I imagine like the last tour, Whitesnake, those are probably, are you doing 90-minute sets? Mm-hmm. See, that's the thing. Like and how many shows a week are you doing?
We're doing 5, usually 5 shows a week.
That's the thing. I mean, that's a lot of work.
Well, that's one thing about rock drumming. I mean, rock drumming Kathy Rich is a friend of mine. Of course, I'm a huge, Buddy Rich he's the bee's knees. He's the cat, His show was in his sheer precision.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling to this day, and he played that way almost up until he left us.
Yes, absolutely.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Pavarotti sang like that up until almost until he left us. That's so rare. In this genre of music, to last an hour and a half, and I'm not speaking boastfully, I have dynamics in my playing. It's just the guys that criticize it, their dynamics don't start until at the bottom of a rock guy's dynamics.
Right.
When you're coming from up here, it's a lot different than coming from here.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I single stroke a lot of stuff for that same reason, though, for power. I can't depend on a lot of ghost notes. Ghost notes in my genre of music truly is a ghost note.
No, you're totally right.
No one hears it.
Yeah.
No
finger
control.
I love
it's all
ghost
wrists.
notes, and it's beauty. It's fluid. It's life. It just oozes butter,
Yeah.
But I inhabited a genre of music that was very specific, and I'll be the first to say it. My playing is very dimensional in that regard.
Right.
Very dimensional. Like, hey, I was born at night, but it wasn't last night. I'm not my favorite drummer, And so I'll tell you what, there's plenty of holes in my program, many holes in my program. But I don't have to next week go down to downtown Vancouver and audition for a job where there's some guys in there that do it all.
You're totally right.
Yeah.
And I don't say that to intimidate anyone or to minimize whatever success I've had over my years. But if I went down to downtown LA I would be afraid to go to some of these auditions. I wouldn't show up.
Yeah.
You wouldn't stand a chance on what's happening out there today. What I'm doing on 2 kick drums, it really is child's play by today's standards.
Sure, but like you said before, it's how you do it, it's how you sound, and the vibe and energy you bring. People don't want to get a drummer that plays rock drums, they want to get Tommy Aldridge.
Oh, well, I don't know about that.
Confirmed.
50 years of playing the drums consistently tells me that's probably true.
Yeah.
I'm very blessed.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so blessed. I'm a product of grace, dude. You're looking at a full-on product of grace right here. So blessed. But you get pigeonholed, you know. And my point being, when I was talking about the going in for the audition, I really don't have to worry about that kind of stuff.
No, of course.
Yeah.
And it's not that I've relied on that. It just happened to be the era in which I came up and how I was brought up on the instrument. The people that scare the hell out of everybody scare the hell out of me, you know. The people that scare lay people. I mean, a lay person, John Bonham, lay people relate to John Bonham. You don't have to be a really heavy-duty appreciator of our instrument to appreciate John Bonham. Listen to what he recorded 30 years ago. Listen to it. It stands up like it was recorded yesterday.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. And there's not a lot of complexity in it. There's a ton of personality, but just download after download, download of originality. You know?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, because I know a lot of folks going to want to know, what was it like working with Ozzy Osbourne?
What was it like?
Yeah, I this is a quote. When I was talking to Sean Brown, he said to me, Sean Brown is now Yamaha marketing manager for international, I believe.
Wow, how'd that ever happen?
Right? No, he's a dear
Tommy
friend.
said it.
He's a dear friend, and that came from Tommy. But he used
you'd
to
have
also
to know
be.
Sean.
He's Canadian, and he was for a long time the marketing manager for Canada. Lovely human being.
Awesome dude.
No one tells a joke better than he does.
No, no one laughs
Confirmed.
longer at his jokes
Yes.
than Sean Brown does either.
All right? Yeah. Yeah. So he said to me, he says, the line he gave back, we were talking about you one day, and he says, yeah. He says, what was it like working with Ozzy? And he says, Ozzy was so high he could go duck hunting with a rake.
Well, yeah, he had a good old time back then.
But you got to work with Randy Rhoads, and I understand you had a very special connection with Randy.
Well, yeah. I mean, what a privilege and an honor to have worked with Randy Rhoads. I've been blessed to work with, golly, so many amazingly talented, not only talented and amazing, but famous guitar players. And it's raised my level of play. I mean, it's made me so much more than I ever otherwise would have been from a musical perspective. Can you imagine how Mitch Mitchell must have felt when Jimi Hendrix came in and played a riff to crosstown traffic?
Yeah.
Hey, come on.
Jeez.
How much
That's fair.
inspiration did somebody need?
Yeah.
Or John Bonham must have felt when Jimmy Page went,
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
The drum part's built in.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it just kicks you in the butt and you're off. You're off to the, you know. And that has happened to me in so many occasions. The inspiration that I've derived from the people that I've worked with, because in any situation, I don't care what, you're only as good as the people that you're working with. If there's one bad note, it makes every note bad. No matter how many good notes, perfect notes you're playing, one note comes down the pike, all the notes become bad. So you're only as good as the people you're working with. My tenure with Ozzy, it was such a yin-yang thing, which so much of my career has been. I love this, and I do anything I can do to inspire or encourage young guys or women to take this up as a vocation. It's the best gig in the world, man. I'm telling you, I've been there and done that. It's a lot of fun. You get to, it's crazy. I don't have words. But there's a yin and a yang. If it was all work, all fun, I couldn't really call it work. You know, there's 22 other hours in the day when you're out touring and so forth and so on. With Ozzy, it was such a privilege and an honor, but it was a real yin yang. You know, you had Ozzy over here and you had Randy over here, and it was like
That's a good point.
It was like the dichotomy was.
And I guess you had Rudy Sarzo in the middle.
Rudy Sarzo on the bass, but the music that we were playing, and it was Randy's music.
Yeah.
It was Randy Rhoads' music.
Yeah.
I was there. It's Randy's music. And there were people that participated in it with him, Bob Daisley, of course, Lee Kerslake, absolutely. But it was Randy Rhoads' music. It came from Randy Rhoads. It was his gift that just passed through him.
Right. You guys been lucky enough to
He
get
got
to
the
share that.
download. He was in the right place to get the download. He would be the first to give credit where it came from.
Yeah.
Which almost any great musician that I've worked with are always very humble in that regard. They'll let you know, It didn't come from me, dude. I just was
came
happened to
right
be in
through
the right
me.
place at the right time. I managed to catch some of it, and all you have to do, all you're obligated to do is pass it on.
Okay, I want to ask a question because you've had a history of making, like, I think a lot of folks think you're the drummer on those first 2 Ozzy solo records because you made those parts yours, and even the Whitesnake record, the Whitesnake record, the big one, that's
87
Ainsley
album.
Dunbar, yeah.
Ainsley Dunbar.
Yeah.
On that, yeah.
And I was always amazed, and I just thought the amount of respect you got, because it's not easy being the guy that's the live guy, right? And you just obviously were so comfortable in your own thing that you just made it yours. And like, you know, who cares who played on the records?
Well,
you know,
thank you very much.
But
Well,
to a point though, because I think a lot of drummers go into that thinking, hey, I'm just copying Lee's parts, which are great, you know. But I mean, you brought this thing, and it's just it became, you know, so heavy and so cool. And I think, and you've always respected those guys. You've never.
Oh,
you know,
absolutely. I'm a huge fan of Ainsley Dunbar. It's ironic, too, and it'll give you some of the choices that I've made throughout my career. I had an opportunity to do both of those recordings. I was living in England at the time, and I was approached, and I was working with Gary Moore, who was signed to Jet Records, which is the same label.
right.
Yes.
And the Whitesnake situation as well. And those were really bad choices on my part. I didn't make the right choice. So that's not any,
But
bad.
I could see making that choice though.
Well, I was working with
Moore
Gary
for
Moore.
crying out loud.
Yeah, I was in the midst of working
And
with
you don't
Gary
know
Moore.
what Ozzy Osbourne. He's without Black Sabbath. Who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Ozzy
You
had
didn't
been pretty
know.
much on mothball since leaving Black Sabbath.
And Gary Moore, you're like, but I'm working with Gary Moore.
Yeah, I had just left Travers and I had moved to England and I was living there, and that's when I hooked up with Gary. And I had some not problems. I'd split up with my girlfriend and I had left the band working with Pat, and my whole life was in upheaval. So I thought, I'm going to move to England and work over there for a while and maybe get the opportunity to play in some of the studios that some of my favorite music was recorded in. I got to do a lot of that actually in the several years that I lived there, but that was when I met Gary over there. And at the time, Ozzy that hadn't happened yet. In fact, when I met Randy, he came to our rehearsal with Bob, and that's when I met Randy. He came to a Gary Moore. He was a huge Gary Moore fan. Yeah.
That's amazing.
And I respect all those from a musical standpoint. I don't know that you could have done anything better. I'll tell you an interesting story about it. As far as the '87 Whitesnake album, I don't know that anybody could have played any of that music better than Ainsley Dunbar. You're not going to touch that. I'm sorry. You'd be silly to try to go in and match that. Yeah. No, it's brilliance, and it's absolutely the perfect thing for those songs, the way he approached them. And he's not even a double bass player. If you listen to end of Bad Boys going out on 16 notes, and that was a real. John Sykes told me he killed himself doing that, because he's not a double bass. And it was several takes, and they, chop, but it works. Whatever works, man. In the studio, hey, it's like love and war. All's fair in the studio, right?
That's right.
So that couldn't have been improved on by anyone. Interesting story. I'm working with Gary Moore. He signed to the same label, Jet Records, that's owned by Don Arden, who is Sharon Osbourne's father. Ozzy hasn't come back since his Black Sabbath departure. And I'm in Don Arden's office and discussing the Gary Moore thing. And he says, Tom, could I ask you a question? He said, can I play something for you and get your opinion? And he played something for me, and it's... It was a Diary of a Madman. And there was no vocals or anything. And he said, I said, wow, that's really cool. And he played another track. I don't know. That was one of the tracks off one of those recordings, one of those albums, Blizzard or Diary. They hadn't been released. There was no vocals on it. I said, wow, that's interesting. Who is it? He said, well, that doesn't matter. But my question is, could you do the drums on these? And I said, well, yeah, I could, but why would you? He said, well, could you do a better job? And I said, well, there's some magic going on here. I said, I'd like to think I could do a better job, but I don't know why you'd want to change this. I had no idea who it was. They were trying to get those guys off of those records before they were even released.
Right. Which they eventually started trying to erase them off anyways.
Yeah, and as far as me getting credit, I don't want credit for Kerslake's drum parts. I'm sorry, with the greatest respect, I love Lee. He's a very musical drummer. I played nothing like him.
Yeah.
It was impossible for me to play those drum parts. They didn't work for me, you know. And so anytime someone calls me, when I get a call as a freelance drummer, I didn't fire Lee.
Right.
I didn't fire Ainsley.
Of course.
I love those guys. You know, I want the best for them. They're fellow drummers. Someone phones me, and in my business, if somebody offers me a gig, my first question is, well, what happened to so-and-so? I listen to the music. That's my first question. I want to hear the music. So Sharon put my picture on that album, and I was very, very upset. I said, Sharon, people are going to think that's me. At that time, those records weren't even really doing anything. I don't want people to think that's me because it's not me. I don't sound anything like that. I said, people will know that that's not me. Yeah. I had a little bit of a following at that time because I'd already had some success, prior success. And so it wasn't an ego thing. I was upset. I was upset because it was like signing an album that you didn't play on or signing a book that you didn't author. And I didn't need to, and I wasn't that big a fan of the book at the time. I was a huge fan of Randy. I'm sorry, because they hadn't done what they ultimately were going to do. Yeah. It was very early on. So that's the story on that. So I don't want credit for that. I never did. I've been very, very transparent. And when anybody would ever ask me a question, I would never take credit for someone else's playing. Why do them the disservice and myself the disservice?
But that speaks to your kindness and your understanding of the situation.
Yeah.
Well, it's just the right thing to do, and you don't deserve a pat on the back
That's
for doing the right thing.
That's not common in the music industry.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily the common choice in the music industry.
But she said, oh, Tom Bomb, it'll be okay. I said, well, it won't be okay.
She's thinking, who knew drummers would care? Yeah. Wow. Crazy. Okay, I have a question for you. Now,
okay, before we move on.
Please.
Now, when you're going to play those songs, you have to give them, you have to be honest to the song. You can't go and go, gospel chops 101 on a tune that you have to faithfully, you have to be faithful to the song. Okay. It's the song comes first. I took liberties that people would criticize me for. I took liberties that people would applaud me. Sure. If you trying to keep count, you know, come on, you have to follow your heart.
At some point, you got to do you,
Yeah, so the intro of Over the Mountain, I played the 16th note triplets.
See, I was literally going to say,
for me,
because Lee Kerslake...
show off and stuff. There was no way I could play. And Randy was saying, man, can you play it heavier? Can you make it your own? Always pushing me and pushing me and pushing me, you know? And so I wasn't on my own. It wasn't just me trying to, shoehorn myself into the program at all. I was trying to give the song some width. I was trying to put some my style of teeth in it, and it was my interpretation of Over the Mountain. And if it pisses people off, I'm sorry, you know?
But I think that's a great point you make, though, about every story you've told so far, especially when it came to playing, you've had a connection with people in the band or with the music, or that's sort of what your goal has been. And like that first TV appearance, I think you said it was on a TV show in New York, the first unveiling of that band, there was a sense, it wasn't just three side guys playing with Ozzy Osbourne. It was a band. There's a real sense of that sort of connection. Maybe it was just you and Randy, I don't know, but Rudy probably, I think Rudy's on that video. Was he not?
Rudy was there, yes. And Lindsey Bridgewater, the keyboard player. Yes. Lindsey Bridgewater wasn't allowed on stage. There were so many,
no keyboards in rock and roll.
Stories about that. I'll tell you one quick one about that. That was supposed to be we were going to go in, it was early in the tour, and it was at 7 o'clock in the morning at some TV show up in upstate New York or someplace. And I remember Ozzy having a quad meltdown when he had to actually sing at that time in the morning. It was hard enough, at 9 o'clock on stage at night. But 7:30 in the morning, he was livid. And we were excited about it. Well, as excited as you could be, because we got to actually play live instead of trying to lip sync the stuff. And Randy was happy about it. But it's unfortunate that within those unpleasant circumstances, that's probably the most realistic recording of Randy, and where people really
Yeah,
get
right.
to hear how Randy, because all the other stuff, even the live stuff that we did, you know, and the mobile stuff, it was the acoustics and the sound and the mix. It's just horrendous. You don't really get to know and hear who Randy really was. That was just plugged straight in,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
There was no overdub. Well, Ozzy, some of the vocals were overdubbed because you know he overdubbed his farts, but it was all straight, you know. Just we counted off.
Yeah.
The reason it's Over the Mountain was so slow is because Ozzy started it off. Oh, I mean not Over the Mountain, but Mr. Crowley.
Yeah.
And that sets the tempo, so it's like
Yeah.
90 BPM.
You're trying to do your job. It's like, well,
and
this is where we're playing
you know,
it.
How am I going to get through the next turnaround? You know? It was,
Can I play that fill that slow? Let's find out.
And
Not
so
gonna do
things
good.
like that, yeah. It was early in the tour. We were still just trying to feel ourselves, you know, feeling each other out. You know, actually still working the tunes up, you know, in a way that we thought would be really reflective of the way we were approaching it. You know.
Yeah, because you guys only toured with the one guitar player too, right?
Oh,
so Randy's got to play rhythm and lead and fill in the space.
And that was one of Randy's gifts. He could do that, and he could come out and he could do. It was because it was really a trio with some keyboard pads in the back. And when you're playing with a trio, like I did with Pat for the years or so before Pat Thrall came aboard, and it became a 4-piece. Whenever the guitar player goes to the solos, it can become vacant really easy because there's very few bass players that have the facility to cover those places. Marco Mendoza would be one of them, but very few guys in a trio format could fill up that place. But Randy had that amazing gift to be able to do that. Never lose the riff, never lose the thumbprint, never lose, you know, the pocket was always there, the groove was always there, and it would be just flawless and so fluid.
You
and
could solo the guitar part and hear the whole song.
The width of his tone and just crazy scary, man. Every day it was like, thank you, Lord, for this privilege. And I'm not exaggerating. When you're working with someone that has that kind of gift, the only thing that exceeded his gifting was his true sweetness.
Really? Wow.
His true sweetness.
Oh, man.
I want to ask one more question.
Please, I saw you got a great one there.
Came in from YouTube, and for all you Drumeo members, we're going to be going live in probably 15 minutes, answering all your questions. But this one came in from Ken and Gilbert, and they ask, is there anyone that Tommy hasn't worked with that he would really want to or wish that you could have?
Oh, golly, yeah. I mean, if you look at my resume, I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword. You think, wow, look at all these folks that he had the privilege and honor of working with. And then on the other hand, well, a guy can't hold down a job. You know? There's some incredible, gee whiz, there's so many. Working with John Sykes, even though we didn't really get, it was more of his solo stuff when he, you know, he kind of was unceremoniously dismissed from Whitesnake, and there's a little bit of, you know, kind of friction there from both of those camps and trying to shoehorn your way in between.
He was big on the '87 record, right?
Yeah, he was he was instrumental, no pun intended, in the sound of that record. And you know, working with John and to have been able to do that a bit more than we did. We did a couple of Japanese tours and a couple of live things, but would like to have pursued more of that with John Boy. You know, maybe he'll do something. He's kind of leaving it, you know, to a pretty late date. You know, really encouragement to come out and get out of the house.
There you go, John Sykes. If you're out there,
This one's for you.
Tommy's ready.
Yeah, come on, man. Come on, man.
He's anxious.
Is there one gig that you've done in your career that sticks out as really special? I mean, I know there's a lot. I'm sure you've had thousands of amazing shows, but is there any particular show that really sticks out as an amazing event to you? And it doesn't have to be musical, just something that you were able to be at or take part in. It's a pretty big question.
I've done so many tours. I've spent so much time on the road that almost all my experience with live music has like been in listening to other bands on the bills, or a support act, or being in a position where we're a support or a special guest on a tour. A really meaningful time for me, of course, working with Randy, that was really the high water point for me as a drummer relating to a guitar player. And that doesn't minimize. It's not a comparison. It was just really magical being in that loop. You know, Gary Moore was very close to that. You know, working with Pat Travers, one of the most gratifying times in my career was when I was working with Pat. give you a really quick story, and it's about a Canadian, one of your fellow Canadians, Mr.
Nice.
Peart. Neil,
Oh, wow.
Neil,
All right.
yeah, good buddy. We did hundreds of shows together when I was with Black Oak, and we just started the end, and nobody knew us from Adam's House Cat, and a band that would open for us would be up in the Detroit area or even up in the Canada,
yeah,
the
sure,
Charlotte
yeah.
part of Canada. Rush would open for us. Well, nobody knew who they were.
Wait. Rush opened for Black Oak.
Yes.
If you
not
have-
many times, but
If you
several
have-
times.
It happened though.
If you've not seen what Black Oak, Arkansas, or Black Oak looked like, that's a pretty interesting.
It was a
double
very
bill.
strange billing.
Oh,
But
yeah.
no one had really had any categories. The boxes, the walls.
It's like
the
when Rush
boxes
opened for
had no-
Kiss.
And
Yeah,
so
exactly.
that's the first time I heard Neil. And I went out and I heard, that's, whoa, man, there's a racket going on, you know? We had some interesting conversations about it, and he agreed. Well, the next time that I saw Neil and Alex and Getty was when I was with Travers. We were supporting them on one of their first really big headlining tours. And we have the privilege, I think Joe Perry opened, we played, and Rush played.
That's awesome.
And Neil and we went way back to that, you know, and he remembered all that. And
Oh, my goodness.
And it was fun. It was really, we did hundreds of shows together, literally, from the time that I was with Black Oak later on and with Travers, and shared a lot of bills, you know, and it was really fulfilling working with Pat, because it was very dramatic music, and Neil was always on the side of the stage every night.
I bet.
You know, and he was one of the few cats that would give you in an interview or an article, he would give you credit, you know, for stuff. I got this here, and he was very much of a gentleman in that regard, you know.
Yeah, no doubt.
And that was one moment that was
That's
really,
amazing to me.
you know,
Wow.
Crazy.
that was really
That's a great
memorable.
point, though. Like you say, you've been on so many tours, but you've seen these acts come up before they were anything, and I'm sure every now and then you're probably, because you know, if you're playing thousands of shows like you
The
are,
first tour that
you're
Def
not-
Leppard did here was on a tour that I was headlining. The first tour that Motorhead did here. We're supporting Ozzy. Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah.
and you're probably, you know, because you're probably, I would imagine you probably didn't always take the time to check out the openers. Sometimes maybe, but
I love music. I love to hear people play, you know, anybody, if it's good. And I was usually out there watching and listening, yeah. And sometimes I would do it as an obligation. If you're the headliner, you're responsible for everything that happens,
Love
because
that.
you're the one that gets this or that, you know. depending. You know, you want a good opening. You know, you want someone who brings something to the table, because it reflects positively. Because it's from that first downbeat to the last one. You know, that is the show. You know.
All right, I got a
Love it.
question from YouTube question. Great screen name. Bamboo Burglar
Nice.
says, fellow Miss... oh my God. Is it Mississippian? Is that correct? Mississippian?
that looks right.
Fellow Mississippian, because you're from Mississippi.
I spent some time in Mississippi when I was growing up. Yeah.
Says he's a fan of yours since '87. Not sure why not before that. Maybe he's not that old. He says, can you demonstrate your cymbal dampening?
My cymbal
Your
damn.
chokes.
I can do it here. It's a little tough. I don't want to go into the lavaliers. But,
Don't worry about it.
You're
It'll
good.
take
What-
care of itself.
What I started doing when I was a kid, I would go, you know, and I would hit the cymbal, do like this. And I started getting more cymbals, and I think, well, I need to choke it with the stick that I hit it with. And I hadn't seen anyone do it, and so I thought, oh, well, that will give, because our instrument, we're so blessed, we get to use almost every limb that we have. Why not bring something? Buddy Rich did it with his brought the drums to the front of the stage with his sheer
Yeah.
precision.
Yeah.
And the audio and the video were coming together with MTV and stuff. So I've grown up through a new, you know, there's so many drummers now that MTV was already, they're 2 months old, and MTV is old hat to them, you know.
That's right.
Well, I came up in that, and it changed things. It became a show, a rock show. It changed so many, had a heavy impact. In the early days with Whitesnake, when we were getting all that rotation, heavy rotation on every radio station, MTV was slammed with Whitesnake. It was kind of like how about Brad Pitt must feel when he walks out of his hotel. Everybody knows you're in town.
Right.
They follow
Yeah.
you around. I mean, he's a real star, you know. But everyone knew where you were. If you looked at the top 10 on Billboard, it was all rock acts, Aerosmith, you know, Bon Jovi, you know, whoever, you know. It was an incredible time. And so I thought, well, I'm a little skinny guy. I always spent my career trying to make people think I'm heavier, to make things sound heavier. Try to bring something into the program instead of going, freeze up one limb to do something, or like over the mountain. So that's how I would do that intro. So it brought something full. It was more, it sounded like it looked like it sounded. Yeah. And so I thought, why not try to, just hit the cymbal and let the stick guide your hand to it. Guide your hand to it. And you be careful at first, you'll get little nicks and cuts, and not too long, your hands will toughen up, and you'll be impervious to very sharp edges.
Well, I think that's also, it really demonstrates how your cymbals are set up, because you kind of have these layers, but they're all like different zones for you to do whatever you're gonna do. You kind of have space to do.
The reason I started with my cymbals flat, I played drums for a long, long time, and initially I used Rogers hardware, and the cymbal stand came, and the tilter was an add-on, and it was about $25 or $30 more dollars. I don't know if you guys even remember, but it had a drum key attachment, and that's the cymbal. The tilter came off, and you could use it without the tilter. Tilter, and it was a ball joint tilter like these guys are. Mm-hmm. Well, that was added expense. I could buy another cymbal stand and get another cymbal rather than spend the money on the tilters. So that's what I did, and I was going to go back and buy all the tilters, and I just never did. And I played with them for so long that it just was a natural way to play with them, with my cymbals flat.
It's super cool. And just want to cover one last thing. We got a couple minutes left. You're also unique in how you have your hi-hat set up, because a lot of folks that play double bass might have one of those drop lock clutches or something like that.
Yeah.
You're like,
Open, close.
2 pairs of hats, side by each.
Yeah. This one stays closed. The static hat, so if I'm playing 2 bass drums and I need to ride on the hat, I always have to worry about having a foot on it. And I've tried to put a hi-hat over here. I had one here for a while, but it just there's a thing, a lot of times I'll open-handed the ride over here, and I figured I'd rather have a splash here than a hat, and so it just was a way for me to have a closed hat. With the one with the clutch on it, where you knock it down and it falls down, sometimes I want it a little tighter than a sound than you get then with that, and that's why I do that,
That makes sense. Wow, that hour flew by.
That's awesome.
That was an hour. Can you believe that?
Wow.
Wow. Thank you all so much for joining us today.
Absolutely.
We're going to give away a 1-year membership to someone in YouTube right now.
Nice.
For those of you that don't know, Drumeo isn't just a YouTube page or a Facebook page.
That's right.
We have lots of cool stuff happening inside. Go to www.drumeo.com. We have a free trial there, 7-day free trial. Come check out and see. We have tons of great lessons. Tommy's going to be shooting some stuff.
He's doing lots of stuff. Lots of songs, and
All right, so I want to give away a year's membership to somebody. You have to be in the chat, and you have to pop up. So Paul Kazulis, if you're out there on YouTube, please pop up in the chat, say hello, and let's make sure you're there. So congratulations, Paul Kazulis. You have won a 1-year's membership to Drumeo.
Nice.
Let's see if he pops up. There's a bit of delay with these things, so you never really know,
Paul Kazulis.
Yeah. While that's happening, I'm gonna keep talking. For Drumeo members, we're gonna give away something super special. We're gonna actually take one of the drum heads off this kit. Oh, there's Paul. Yes,
Nice.
Paul, congratulations.
Congrats.
Paul, email me at krad@drumeo.com and I'll get you hooked up with a 1-year's Drumeo membership.
Nice.
For our members, Tommy's here for a couple of days. He's going to be shooting on this drum kit. We are going to take some of the heads off. We're going to give away one of these heads signed to a Drumeo member. And I'm going to select that person right now. Man, it's slow on the draw today.
I thought you were going to ask some
I got in
riveting
I
question.
got in heavy trouble last week for asking trivia questions. So this week it's going to be something different. Let's see. All right, I'm going to go with a different thing I normally do. Here we go.
Suspense.
You want to give me a quick hand drum roll, Tommy? Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Congratulations to Paul M45. You have won a signed, played drumhead by the great Tommy Aldridge. Obviously, I can't send it to you until he's finished using it. That seems fair.
It's going to be more dented.
Dents in it.
Yeah. But congratulations. Paul, please go ahead and email me at krad@drumeo.com, and we'll make sure to get that out to you as soon as Tommy's finished with it, but not a moment sooner.
Nice. And the other thing I will mention too is we're going to be live again with Tommy. This is probably on your list, and I just took
No,
this moment
I was
from
going to
you.
throw to you. Throw to Brandon. Here we go.
We're going to be live on Wednesday with Tommy, I believe 3 p.m. Pacific time. We're going to be going over a bunch of grooves. Tommy's going to be playing a bunch of tracks. And yeah, we'll be giving away some other stuff too. So make sure you come hang out for that.
Thank you all so much for hanging out today. For those of you in the members area, stay put. That's the word.
Yeah, we'll
stay
come
where you
back.
are. We're going to come right back. Tommy's going to answer your questions. And otherwise, everybody else, we'll see you again next week on the Drum Department. Take care.
Cheers.